That's the fellow from Transit here, isn't it?
I don't know who even was. Or is he the cycling guy? Oh, the guy at the back. Did you there? He was the young guy that does that.
That's okay. That's okay.
Could be, yeah.
Good evening. I'd like to call our regular council meeting on Tuesday, April 29th to order at 6 p.m. I'm Mayor McNeil Smith, and colleagues in the chamber this evening are Councillor Richard Novick, Councillor Terry O'Keefe, Councillor Chandra Toole, to my right Councillor Scott Garnett, and attending the meeting online this evening is Councillor Sarah Duncan. Do you want to just confirm your audio, Councillor Duncan?
Yes, good evening.
Good evening.
Just to note, the microphones on your end seem very, very sensitive right now. I don't know if there's another microphone somewhere in the room that's on, but just in case the audio for people online might be kind of garbled.
Sorry, when I'm speaking, it's a bit garbled?
No, it was okay. It's just earlier there was a lot of crosstalk sounds, so it was like it was picking up background noise as well. So
okay,
it might be a volume thing.
Thanks for noting that, because we have experienced that if there's more than one mic on at a time. And Councillor Duck has other commitments and will not be attending this evening's meeting. Good evening to members of staff in attendance this evening, and good evening to members of the public, those also in the council chamber or who may be watching the live stream or maybe watching a recording of the meeting at a future date. I'd next turn to the territorial acknowledgement, and I want to respectfully acknowledge that we are holding this evening's meeting, and indeed the entire town of Sidney is in the territory of the Wasanich people. They are today represented by the Sartlip Nation, the Sycam Nation, the Sayot Nation, sorry, did I say Paquachin Nation? You did now. And the Malahat Nation, who have been stewards of these lands for millennia, that is thousands of years. And we appreciate they continue to have an interest in these lands, a relationship with these lands today, and appreciate the importance of our working relationship to steward these lands, not only for today's generation, but future generations together. Next, turning to approval of the agenda, we have several changes since the agenda was published on Thursday. The first are 4 items of correspondence received after it was published. I'll just note the sender and what item it will go to. So we have correspondence from Bonnie Goldenhar, and that will go to item 6.A, the Rothsay Development Variance Application. We have a second letter of correspondence from Brian and Peggy Losi on the same application, 6A. And we have an item for 13A from Finley Mooney, which is regarding the transit MOU under 13A. And last, we have an item from the Summergate Strata Council that will go under item 13C. And that's release of the covenant on Kenora Road that impacts them. That's the first item, those 4 additional items of correspondence. The second is item 13D, is the staff report regarding the proposed Sidney Bike Festival. We do have a presentation coming up very shortly on that festival, and I would like to move item 13D to immediately after the presentation and any questions we have of the presenter. And lastly, we have a motion to go on camera this evening. That's in addition to the agenda, and that will be the last item that we read when we get to that point on the agenda. So I'd seek a motion to approve the agenda as amended. Moved by Councillor Novick. Second by Councillor Garnett. Any questions, discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? That carries unanimous. Thank you. We're next turning to our regular public participation period, where we provide an opportunity for members of the public to come forward and speak to council. You have up to 4 minutes. There's a little button to activate the microphone. You'll see a red light. We'd ask that you provide your name and the municipality that you resided and the topic you're wishing to speak to. And first time, I'll ask if there's anyone wishing to come forward this evening. Please come forward. Good evening.
Good evening, Mayor and Council.
We'll just try the button there. You'll see a red light come on at the top of the microphone. There we are.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. My name is Barry Myron. I reside in Saanich. I am the owner of the property at 2499 Rothsay Avenue. I'm here asking to retain the dwelling and continue to house the tenant as long as possible. I'm available for any questions if you have any. I'll be here. Thank you.
Mayor, excuse me, Mayor, could you turn your mic on? Thank you.
Thank you. Sorry. That's not me. Thank you. We'll next turn to item 4D1, which is a presentation on the Sidney Bike Festival, and we have Jon Watkin from VCL Racing Society. Good evening.
I asked the RCMP to give me a grand entrance for what we're doing, since we're talking about cycling.
Virtual entrance.
My name is Jon Watkin. I'm a director of the Victoria Cycling League Society. I'm also a professional race organizer. To give you a bit of background about myself and my experience, I've been organizing events for over 20 years. Notably, we've done a number of cycling events in downtown Victoria with the Bastion Square Grand Prix, and which has now moved over to the BC legislature, and we continue to do that event to this present day. I'm also the co-founder of the Langford Bike Fest. Since the opening of the Geordieland Bike Park, myself and two people were part of that catalytic component of creating this project, and are bringing an annual event to the city of Langford. And notably this year in July, we're bringing the Canadian National Mountain Bike Championships to the city of Langford. Through my company, we have partnerships with other municipalities in terms of bringing high-profile cycling events to their doorstep. The city of Campbell River, the district of Nanaimo, Cowichan Valley Regional District, and we have a new event in Cumberland that is also coming up later this year. So to say that we have experience bringing high-profile cycling events to the community is an understatement. It is worth noting that in 2009, I did bring a bicycle race to Sydney, which we did in the almost exact area. And the only reason why we didn't continue is because we came back to reactivate the Bastion Square Grand Prix in downtown Victoria. Otherwise, we would have loved to continue racing in this event, and it received a lot of accolades from participants, spectators, and local businesses. So this proposed Sidney Bike Festival began primarily from a need from participants in terms of visitors coming from outside the area, coming to the island, but also limiting the amount of driving they need to get to specific locations. The town of Sydney, District of North Saanich is a perfect space for hosting these kinds of events. And the Sidney Bike Festival that we're proposing, we'd like to consider it as a pilot project that could be considered for a mainstay event that we could bring to the local community year after year. It's worth noting that the festivals that we bring are not just about, guys and women wearing spandex. It's about families. It's about bringing the community together. There's a strong electric bike component as well that we can bring. A lot of people that live in the area like to commute, like to take advantage of the cycling infrastructure that is available to them. So there's an education and awareness component that we can also bring to the community, knowing that there's always dynamic tension between motorists and cyclists, and we play an active role in that part. As it relates to the Sidney Bike Festival, the weekend of May 30th to June 1st is the British Columbia Cycling Championships. On May 30th, we have received approvals from RCMP as well as District of North Saanich and the Victoria Airport Authority to have an event on the west side of the airport, and that's a full road closure. We've also received full permissions from District of Metchosin to run a road cycling event on Saturday, May the 31st for a 10-kilometer circuit on that day. And then the culmination of that weekend is a downtown cycling event called a Criterium, which we are proposing for Sunday, June the 1st. The requirements for a Criterium it must be a full closure. No vehicles are permitted on the course. There are physical barriers and barricades that would prevent vehicles from getting on the course. It requires certified traffic controllers to monitor those specific access points and corners, but the actual pedestrian crosswalks are managed by volunteer marshals. So everything is controlled in terms of access. Radio communication ensures that people are not crossing the course as cyclists are racing through. And there are gaps between different racing events that allow for more larger groups of people to get through. It requires a comprehensive traffic control plan, a comprehensive communications plan, which we've been working with Bruce DeMar and his team. And we feel very confident that we have a really good plan that at the very minimum present a pilot opportunity for the city, but also something that could be seen as a regular feature event for the region. We are very mindful of local businesses and local residents in the area, particularly those people that are living within the confines of the course. So we have a plan to have proactive communication through the residences, through the strata councils, have volunteers on hand to allow for entry and exit of the different housing complexes that are surrounded by this particular event. And most certainly want to invite local businesses and have them actively involved in this event so they're feeling as much of an economic benefit as possible. So that's basically it. I didn't want to, it's easier for me to speak to it instead of having a PowerPoint presentation, but I invite any questions that Mayor and Council may have.
Thank you, Mr. Watkin. I'll turn to colleagues if there are any questions. Councillor O'Keefe.
Thank you. Thank you for the presentation. So I'm curious, where do you expect, where are people coming from? Is this far afield, the mainland, the States, or?
So this is a provincial championship event, so
Okay.
it's limited to only residents of British Columbia who are licensed in order to compete. And so we expect visitors from the Okanagan Valley, the interior, Fraser Valley, up at Vancouver Island, so it does cast a fairly wide net, and we also attract a number of age groups from youth as young as 13 to masters racers. I think we have a couple already that are 77 years old that are still competing at a very decent level. So, and the intent is to draw these people locally to the area and encourage them to spend money, stay in hotels, and do our part to drive economic benefits.
Right, great. You mentioned about, I like the comment about education and awareness component and including family and youth. So what does that look like? How do you intend to reach out to them, and what sort of activities would be available for them?
So as an example, at the BC Legislature, where we do our annual event down there, we use the grounds of the legislature to do a kids, it's a bicycle, almost like a rodeo, and we have different people that provide those services where the kids are allowed to ride in an enclosed area, do obstacles, and learn how to ride, learn how to do turn signals, learn the basics of cycling. In the case of what we want to do here, there is a section on, I believe, if you look at the map, you've got 3rd Avenue, which is kind of blocked off from Beacon and Bevan. There's a kind of a nice open area where we could create a nice little kids area. Another thing we do is we invite kids and their parents to do what we call a victory lap around the circuit of the course in between events, and it gives the kids the feeling that they're participating in some kind of Olympic light event, and the people are clapping and cheering. So that's another kind of interesting element that we do. In the past, we've done invited the mayor of Victoria as well as Olympians to take part, and that's something for maybe future consideration. I don't know if Mayor McNeil Smith, you'd want to get on a bike and go on a one-lap challenge with an Olympian, but we've always encouraged and try to involve council and mayor in these types of events because it's engaging with the community and it's being plugged into it.
Great. And in terms of our local community, how will you reach them, like, so that those young kids and families, through local schools, or how do you?
Yeah, I mean,
what's the plan to kind of let them know that this is happening?
Yeah, I mean, I think first of all we lean on the local businesses as well. Like Russ Hayes Bike Shop is actively involved in the community, and we want to work closely with them. For volunteer engagement, we would typically engage with like the Rotary Club, other organizations where they might want to be involved in helping with our event. We talked about one thing I didn't talk about at previous events is we do engage with First Nations groups. So with the Campbell River event, for example, we are engaged and partnered with the Weewakai First Nation. So there's a lot of opportunities there. I think taking lead from council and from the local community in terms of where the opportunities are, because those people are much more familiar than the area than we are. So
Yeah, great. So my suggestion would be send something to Sidney Elementary School, and maybe the middle school as well would
Yeah.
be good places to target.
absolutely, and we've been in touch with Morgan over at Sydney BIA as well, and so we want to work through those channels as well.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Terry. Chad, or Councillor O'Toole?
Thank you, Mayor. Thanks, Mr. Watkin, for your presentation. Great to see the depth of experience you have and the organization VCL Racing Society has with respect to organizing these events. And I think collectively it would be remiss if we didn't acknowledge the safety threat that's there, and acknowledge recent tragic events in Vancouver. And I guess from your perspective as an organizer of events of this nature, speak to us a little bit about the types of facilities you have in place as an organizer to ensure a safe event. You made reference to physical barriers as an example, and certified marshals to help with pedestrians and traffic movement. But elaborate on that in light of, I think, heightened concerns certainly that I have, and I expect some of my colleagues do as well, please.
Yeah, and these are the same concerns that downtown Victoria and the city of Victoria have had as well, in terms of ensuring that we don't have people inadvertently getting on the course, crossing the course in areas where they're not authorized to do so. But from our standpoint, the things that I've outlined that are current in the plan have been sufficient. If there's additional measures, I know there was one year with City of Victoria where they've asked us to hire security, but that was more to do with the protection of our own assets that were being kept overnight the previous night. But in terms of, we have a huge cycling community. We're partnered with the Triple Shot Cycling Club that has over 250 members. And so another part of our plan is just having eyeballs, having people helping us to monitor areas of the course, particularly, we talked about the high density residential housing units. We need to have marshals there so that if people need to get in and out of that place, they're not going to inadvertently drive their car on the course. So part of the plan is to get actual feet and bodies on the ground to make sure that they're spotting for these opportunities, and there's a means for them to get to where they want to go safely.
If I may, Mayor, if you just elaborate then specifically on your reference to physical barriers, what is a physical barrier by definition in your presentation?
So we use what are called special event metal barricades. So they're 8 foot by 3 foot metal barricades with flat feet that interconnect, and these are placed strategically along the course to prevent people from crossing through. There's also a requirement to allow for easy access for emergency vehicles to get on the course in case there is an emergency. And those are different barricades that are used that make it easy for them to be moved so an emergency vehicle can get on the course. It's worth noting, if there is an emergency, whether it's fire department or police, and they need to get through the event to respond to an emergency, we shut down the event, and that's the same for any other events that we utilize.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. I'll turn to Councillor Gurnett.
Thank you, Mr. Watkin, for your presentation, and thank you, my colleague, Councillor Untill, for that question. I had one similar as well. With regards to the actual course, just looking at it, I'm noting that on Bevan it appears to be 3 pedestrian crossings at 4th, 3rd, and 2nd. But on Beacon, there just seems to be 1 at 4th and 2nd. So is there a reason why there wasn't, other than it seems to be close to where the finish line is that why there wasn't one placed at around 3rd Street?
Absolutely. You cannot have a pedestrian crossing at the start-finish line as a fundamental safety requirement.
Okay, perfect. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Novak.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you for the presentation. It's quite comprehensive. My only concern is there are a lot of residences in this area, and you did say that people would be accommodated somehow, but with street closures from 6 a.m. to 6 p.m., could you provide a little bit more detail on just how people will be accommodated if they have to get in and out of their residences?
Sure.
Especially when you've got high-speed cyclists doing circuits.
Yeah, well, a big component is proactive notification. So in typical permits that we receive, we're required to notify residents 2 weeks in advance of the event that they're aware of the event, so long enough that they're able to plan and prepare and anticipate. And that includes direct hand-delivered notices, ad mail, signs located at the critical areas. So proactive notification has to be part of it. And in those notifications, there's a specific phone number. So if a resident needs to get to or from, they have a number that they can call, and we would facilitate that during the event. The other thing that we talked about with your staff is through the strata corporations, we don't have personal addresses to a lot of the people, the residences that live in the area. So we would need to rely on the strata corporations that are able to communicate when there's something like this going on and what happens if someone needs to get to or from the event. Particularly in the areas where you have those residences, we need people specifically from our volunteer base to be mobilized in around that area so that we can tell people, if people are still not aware of what's going, they know what's going on, but we have an opportunity to help them whether they need to get to their unit or from their unit. In the case of a vehicle, we can't have a vehicle leaving a unit while there's a bike race. They would have to wait until there's a pause or a gap in between the events. So it's important to notice that the events are not concurrent. There are gaps in between There are gaps in between each race that would allow the opportunity for people to move, especially if it's a vehicle.
Thank you. That answers my question. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor. I have a supplemental question, I guess, to that previous question, and that is, for example, there are two double-door gated underground driveways on 4th Street between 4th and Sidney Avenue. So there may be 30 or 30 plus residents. Well, sorry, in Uranza there's 58 residences. So given the communications that you're describing, every resident may not be aware of it. Will marshals or appropriate staff be at those garage doors
Absolutely.
during the day?
Absolutely. Yeah.
How long, roughly estimated, would a particular resident in a building have to wait before they were allowed access or egress?
The longest I can anticipate would be probably about 25 minutes to half an hour.
Okay. Thank you. Just looking online, not seeing any. Councillor O'Keefe?
And to caveat to that, if there's an urgency, then we would make the judgment to pause the event completely. There may be an instance where you have a resident that has a family urgent family matter that doesn't require 911, and we would take those requests on a case-by-case basis. So if it is urgent, then it would be up to me and my discretion to decide whether we need to pause to allow that person to leave in that kind of situation.
Okay, so I do have a follow-up, and that is, so I'm been thinking about people leaving their underground garages to egress.
Yeah.
If they want to access, they could be coming from a variety of directions.
That's right, yeah.
And so those drivers are gonna have to indicate to a marshal where they want to.
Yeah, so if they're coming back, I mean, there's a couple of options. One is temporary parking outside the race course until the event is over. Otherwise, it would be wait until there's a safe period of time that the driver can get to where they need to go and find the shortest path to do it. Because if they're on the northwest corner, but they need to get to the other side of the course, it's not a safe option for them. It's best for them to be as close to where they need to be as opposed to being on the opposite, and then they have to be put on the course while there might still be people on the course. So we'd have to kind of make sure people understand if that's happening, they have to make it easier for us so that they can get to where they need to go within the shortest distance possible.
Okay, so I'm gonna stay on 4th Street for a moment. So between Beacon and Bevan, there are 3 residences with garage doors. You did speak during your presentation when these races were held previously.
Yes.
What year was that again?
2009.
Right. So that was pre those 5 residents that I've
Yep.
just described, and of course there's more on Bevan now, and I won't bother going to the other streets. Thank you for the logistics that you've planned for it, but it's just something to consider. Councillor O'Keefe, did you have a follow-up?
Yes, I did. A couple more come to mind, thank you. So in my recollection, I don't think we've ever approved a shutdown of that big a area for such a long period of time.
Right.
Usually it's something that's early in the morning or for a few hours here or there. So this is quite a significant thing for us.
Right.
And I guess what I'm wondering is, why does it need to be downtown? Like, did you is it the ambience of downtown, or did you consider other locations that might have a, less of an impact on the number of multifamily residences down there? And,
Yeah, I mean, for us, it's first modeling what we've done in the past that's successful, particularly in downtown Victoria. We have looked at an area located in the commercial area just north of the Amazon depot across from the highway. But if we're trying to bring something that's going to bring economic benefit or maximum economic benefit to the area, that location is somewhat removed. I would think that people that are actually in downtown Victoria, they're going to come here, they're going to watch their friends, family members, they're going to want to eat at restaurants, they're going to want to, whatever businesses are open at the time, take advantage of that opportunity. Working with, there's some local pubs that are adjacent to the area, so there's some interesting hospitality things that we've already discussed with staff that we could do. We can't do that across the highway. So for us, it was just finding that what we think is a great chance to invigorate and bring something that we think would benefit the community, recognizing there might be some perceived challenges in terms of notifying residents, but I think given our track record, and I invite you to contact your counterparts in the municipalities that I've mentioned as well. We've got a very strong track record of working with municipalities that have the exact same questions and concerns that you have.
Okay, and just one other, I'm not sure if it's for you or maybe for staff, in terms of the setup and taking it down, so you've got barriers that you bring in, are there other aspects that town staff have to be involved in? And maybe that's I don't know if that's a question for you or through staff. And if there's overtime costs or staff costs, is that something that you cover?
Yes, yeah. So we've had a discussion related to the staff time as it relates to there's a parking notification where we can't have parked vehicles along that particular course. So there's that. We have a budget for what's called a courtesy tow. So if somebody decides to still park a vehicle even though there's a sign that says you can't, we'll move the vehicle to an adjacent block as part of a courtesy tow. It's an unticketed tow. And then as far as the other component is I think it's the Sidney Fire. They want to be on hand near the event because there's another event going on to the west of where we're located. So having them nearby, there's a cost component to that we've been advised and we've budgeted for as well.
Okay, that's great, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Seeing no further questions, thank you for your presentation, and thank you for taking our questions this evening. We're next going to turn to the item on our agenda, where we'll have an introduction from staff. We may have questions of staff, and then deliberate. Thank you. And so, turning to item 13D, I might turn to Mr. Demare to provide an introduction, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The report brings forward a request from VCL Racing to host the Bike Festival in Sydney's downtown area on June 1st, as presented by Mr. Watkin. The event includes the bike racing on a closed course, and it's part of the BC Cycling Championships as outlined in the presentation. They're expecting up to 1,000 spectators to watch approximately 250 athletes as part of the event. As the presenter indicated, he'd like to see this as an annual event, but that's obviously subject to council approval, and being this as a pilot to see how this event would go. So subject to council's approval, the event would require approval of road closures of Beacon, Second Street, Bevan, and Fourth Street, as well as authorization for amplification as part of the event. The report includes a number of conditions if this event were to be approved by council. And I'm here to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Demare. I'll turn to Councillor Garnett to begin.
Thank you, Mayor. Through you to staff. And reading the report, before I even read it and saw it on the agenda, I was like, oh, World Oceans Day. And then I saw it was, oh, great. You've reached out and spoke to them. It looks great. And just from 2 years ago when they held the first one, it was a really, really nice day. And they had I believe they counted 1,000 people there for that event as well. So it would be really busy. The only question I have is, you mentioned that you also contacted the Sydney BIA and received their general support. So when I read that, it kind of, I wonder, were there concerns that they had that they brought forward to you?
To the Mayor, to Councillor Garnett. We actually met with the BIA, Sydney BIA. We had a good meeting with emergency services as well as the organizer, and talked through the event. And the BIA was supportive. They think it's a great event. Obviously, it has to work through, maybe there's the odd business that, making sure notifications and those aspects are appropriately dealt with. But,
thank you. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. I'll go to Councillor Novick, then Councillor O'Keefe.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and through you to staff. I think the answer to the question is in your report, but I would just like to confirm it. The time frame is from 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. There is a request for sound amplification. It does say that 6 to 8:30, I think it is, or 6 to 8 is set up. I just want to make sure that there isn't going to be sound amplification before the race actually gets underway.
Through the Mayor to Councillor Novak, my understanding is the amplification is strictly as part of the racing event, probably announce races as they come up. So it wouldn't be happening in advance to the actual opening of the event.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor O'Keefe.
Thank you. I'm wondering if any consideration was given to the parking crunch that will be an issue. So, we have parking issues. We would expect to have some with World Oceans Day on its own with 1,000 people coming there. But adding another 1,000 visitors and then having a good amount of our street parking unavailable because it has to be cleared for the bike race. So was there any discussions about having the organizers identifying other areas for parking, whether that's through, school parking lots or other places?
Through the Mayor to Councillor O'Keefe. I think there's opportunities to look at other parking areas, but in the overall scope of this event as well as Oceans Day event, it's actually smaller than some of the other events we do see in Sydney. Like, for example, Torquemaster, they have much more significant attendance, and parking seems not to be an issue. So people do understand with events they may have to walk a little bit, but it hasn't created a significant issue on larger events. We also would obviously encourage people to ride their bikes or take transit as well to events such as these.
Okay, good, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor O'Toole.
Thank you, Mayor. Through to staff, first off, with respect to the responses from the representative of the organizing society, were staff satisfied with the comments around the type of physical barrier that is proposed at these locations?
Through the Mayor to Councillor O'Toole, the proposed measures that were being taken will be reviewed. In view of sort of the recent events, I anticipate we'll be meeting with our emergency services and RCMP to see what guidelines they would be able to provide as well. Often, and most of our events, we do place more physical barriers like vehicles at sort of main key points to try to protect the street areas. So those sorts of things we'll be speaking to and working through with the RCMP. Other item I sort of expect, and the organizer could maybe speak to this a bit clearer, but I would anticipate most of the spectators are actually still going to be on the sidewalk as the road is open for the cyclists doing the racing. So I anticipate most people be on the sidewalk and not like filling the street. It's going to be the athletes that are on the street.
Thank you. And if I may, through you, Mayor, to staff, a couple of references in the report, of course, a reference to the event taking place simultaneous World Oceans Day. In some of your responses, references to Torque Masters and the event, and what I recollect from those in the staff report refers to World Oceans Day and that street closure being approved, or sorry, in that event, and those implications being discussed back in January of this year. Is it me, or does it seem a little 11th hour? We're talking about a month away for this event, June 1st, as I understand it, with the type of notification that's required, and the expanse, I guess, of residents who may be affected by this. Are staff comfortable with what is a little over a month to be able to provide notice and planning and the types of approvals that are listed in the recommendations?
Through the mayor to Councillor O'Toole, just a little bit of background. We've had ongoing discussions with the applicant for some time. The original course that was being proposed was took a much larger area than just the course as being proposed, and staff did have concerns that the impact would have been more challenging, so it was reduced down to the course now being proposed. In terms of, sorry, your other part of your question was the time frame?
Notification to residents within this tight window now.
I think it's not unreasonable, a month for someone to know in advance. Typically, when we do have events submit notices in advance, it's only 2 to 3 weeks that those notices go out to residents. So we'd be falling within those timelines.
Thank you. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. I'm going to invite the presenter to come forward if Mr. Watkin, if you might. I do have another question, and that is turning to the map, which shows the route highlight in solid yellow, the overall boundary in pink dots, if my eyes are serving me, and the blue areas for riders and teams. And I'm noticing that all of all of Beacon Avenue between 4th and 5th, and from Beacon Avenue until the Anavets, almost the Anavets parking lot, is for riders. So Anavets will have access. I'm seeing a U-shaped blue line with an arrow, I think. So Anavets will have access to their parking lot?
Yes, yeah, we've already spoken to them.
Was consideration given to, and this has happened with other functions where organizations actually utilize the Anavets parking lot?
Yes, and that came up in our discussion with staff.
And that's not a viable option versus closing Beacon Avenue for that entire block?
I think we discussed that as far as the Anavet, that area needed to remain open and accessible for the duration of that particular day. Is that correct? I remember we were talking about.
Yeah, the original event footprint included all of 4th Street, which would have had a greater impact on Anavets, and that's why one of the reasons it was scaled down.
Right.
Okay, but there's an impact on Anavets versus the impact in the entire business, on all the businesses on Beacon Avenue between 4th and 5th.
I think what the mayor is trying to say is, was it explored to use Anavet's parking lot instead of Beacon for a staging area for the cyclists?
Again, per discussion with staff, we were advised to keep that area open and accessible for what that area is used for, and I believe, so this is the same location that's used by a veterans organization. Is that the same place? And my understanding is there will be people wanting to get in and out of that specific area on that day, and that we were not going to try to have people parking and using that area for our event specifically. It would be left for the public and for specific people that want to get to and from that specific location.
Okay, no, I can appreciate that that was discussed with staff. Anavets is a nonprofit, but they operate during the day. They have a pub and a restaurant and a games room and so on.
Right.
But you also have, 10 or so businesses on Beacon Avenue between 4th Street and 5th Street.
Right.
And there have been other events where the Anavets parking lot has been used as a staging area for another organization.
Understood.
And sometimes on a Sunday.
Yeah.
But thank you for the answer. I appreciate the consideration that was given. Any further questions, colleagues? Looking online, not seeing any. We do have thank you again. We do have a staff recommendation. Councillor Novak.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm pleased to read in the recommendation. The recommendation is, and I so move, that VCL Racing Society, VCL, be authorized to use sound amplification and to close the following streets. Number 1, Beacon Avenue from 5th Street to 2nd Street. Number 2, Bevan Avenue from 4th Street to 2nd Street. Number 3, 4th Street from 9813 4th Street to Bevan Avenue. Number 4, 3rd Street from 9813 3rd Street to 9732 3rd Street. And number 5, 2nd Street from Beacon to Bevan Avenue, from 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. on Sunday, June the 1st, 2025, to accommodate the Sidney Bike Festival event, subject to the conditions outlined in the staff report dated April 29th, 2025.
Do we have a seconder?
A second for discussion.
So Councillor Nova, Councillor Rintoul, I'll turn to the mover first.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think events like these are great for the city. I think it brings people to the town. It brings people in front of our retail community on Beacon Street and in the downtown area. I think the inconvenience to the people living downtown is minimal. And I think people that do live downtown expect that there be events like this several times a year. And in fact, that's actually one of the attractions to living downtown, is that you sometimes can get a bird's eye view of these events from your balcony window. I think the street closures are not going to cause that much distress to local residents. I believe the proponent, in cooperation with the staff, have developed quite a comprehensive plan. I know these things are quite complex, but it certainly appears that they have the situation well in hand. They appear to have sufficient experience to have, in having done this before, to do this here in Sydney without any major issues. I'm quite happy to support it. I think it's good for the town, and I'd like to see more events like this coming to Sydney. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. I'll turn to Councillor Rintoul.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. I'll acknowledge, I look forward to hearing what my colleagues' thoughts are with respect to this item. I remain on the fence in part. I'm just a little concerned about the timeline that is before us with respect to seeing all of this planning put in place. And I suspect in the background a lot of this has already happened, and that a lot of these conversations have already been held, but they haven't been held with residents at large who live in these areas. And I do have some concern with respect to the type of inconvenience they may experience. Having said that, I recognize it happens with other events in town, as Councillor Novak has referenced. I think it would be an exciting event. I think it would be fun to watch. I'm just at this point not comfortable with the timing that's been proposed, although I appreciate staff's confidence to be able to move forward with it and provide notice to residents as required. I'll yield there, Mayor, and look forward to my colleagues' comments. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. I'll turn to Councillor Duncan, please.
Yeah, thank you. Since Councillor Rintoul asked, I'll vote in support of this motion. The closures on so many areas downtown where there are residents.
Sorry,
have,
Councillor Duncan. Councillor Duncan, if I could interject for a moment. Councillor Duncan. Councillor.
Me pause, but I think seeing that they will be sending notices.
Councillor Duncan, can you hear me?
I'm sorry.
Yeah, your video and your audio is stuttering.
I'm getting a notice saying unstable network connection, so I must be cutting out on you.
Could you perhaps just turn your video and that
I can hear you fine.
Sorry, we can't see and hear you fine. If you could try again with your video off, thank you.
Sure.
Go ahead.
Yeah, so with my video off, is my audio better?
So far, so good.
Apologies, I will be canceling TELUS. Okay. But yeah, so I think the issues that the mayor raised with residents getting out give me pause, but seeing that they will be given notices 3 weeks in advance, I think that's enough time that if people need to get out of their buildings or know that they'll be coming in and out during those times, they will know to move their cars ahead of the event when it starts, out somewhere onto a side street, and then, be able to access it if they need to, or make plans to use an alternate form of transportation, or if it's not something set in stone the time they go, they can make another time. So I agree with that the residents will probably be minimally impacted. And I think it's a great event to coincide with World Oceans Day. I know that our town can handle that many people at once. Thanks.
Thanks, Councillor Duncan. I'll turn to Councillor Gurnett.
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, when I look at the map, and there was previous mention about how much is closed off, but I look at it in terms of reference of what the Torque Masters is pretty much an all-day event on a Sunday, and I think with the exception of Bevan, there's actually more street closures in and around Beacon. So, and it seems to manage fine. I've not heard any problems from the Torque Masters or town staff about issues with people being able to get in and out of their buildings. I think the staff has spoken to the amount of time, and it sounds like there's been a fair amount of work gone into it with staff from the organizer. So I'm pretty confident that if staff thought there were some serious problems, they would let us know that at this time. To me, it's akin to being on, say, a cul-de-sac, and the town's repaving the entire street, and they give you, your street's going to be shut down the entire day, so you make alternate arrangements to park your car somewhere else, or you find an alternate way to get around. So I mean, it will be an imposition. I'm not going to acknowledge it's not going to be for residents, but this will potentially have a great benefit for our community and for our businesses. Although there will be challenges with pedestrians getting to and from the business, but our community is becoming more and more a place that people want to come and hold events like this, and it's a positive that people consider us in that light. So I'll support the recommendation. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Keith.
Thank you. I have mixed feelings. I think it would be a great event to host in downtown Sydney. Bringing more people to the town is always good for business, and maybe they'll come back again, so that's good. For me, what's different about this is, as I mentioned earlier, the duration of the closure for about 12 or more hours. And what's different, I think, from the Torque Masters is if there's people that want to get out of their building, they can still get out. They're not going to have to wait for a marshal, perhaps for, I think what we heard, 25 or so minutes for somebody to come along and let them out or help them get into their building. So that was a bit of concern for me. So I think there will be a significant impact for those residents. Having said that, I'm inclined to take a leap of faith to see how it goes, since it's been put forward as a pilot project. And I would look forward to staff's analysis, sort of an after-action review sort of thing, to see what issues we experienced. So that's where I am at this point. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor O'Keefe. I appreciate the experience experience the proponent has. And it sounds like there have been events like this in what we might call downtown residential areas. I made reference to the accessing egress for buildings. I do remember the races from 2009. I remember there were the steel barricades as described. I also remember large bales of hay. I don't know if it was on street corners, and the race was a success. It was well attended by visitors or spectators. There's I don't recall the route then, or if it was the same street closures. I don't think it was the same street closures as these, but that doesn't matter. What is different today about our downtown from 2009 is that there are many 4, 5, 6-story buildings, residential buildings now in this footprint that will, even upon receiving notice, will have to make arrangements with regards to access egress, either make arrangements before or after the event, or try to be active during the event. The other is the change that is different is, particularly since we have those many hundreds of residents, several hundreds of residents in that downtown core area now, Sidney Avenue and Bevan Avenue are much busier than they were 15 years ago in terms of access egress in and out of our downtown. And by closing those 2 blocks of Bevan Avenue, you are taking a major thoroughfare under out of use for 12 hours. I appreciate that if you are in downtown Victoria or other downtowns that have larger city downtowns, that there are more alternate routes for people to get around. We don't have really viable routes other than those for accessing egress. You're going to be going through neighborhoods. You're finding your way if they're a visitor to World Oceans Day or other events. But having said all of that, I'm willing to see this go forward this year. We'll certainly want to be open to any feedback that we receive from residents, from businesses that are potentially impacted, from the BIA itself, perhaps, if it monitors this event, and so on. So thank you again to the organizer and for working with staff and the report that we have before us this evening. Seeing no further discussion, I'll call the question. All in favor? Councillor Duncan? In favor? Thank you. Thank you again. You're welcome to stay for the balance of the meeting if you wish, but it's still late outside, so maybe. Okay. Next, turning to the agenda as published, we are now at item 5A under bylaws, and we have bylaw number 2288, the financial plan 25 to 29. I'll turn to Mr. Hissick for an introduction, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Council approved a 5-year financial plan that included a general tax increase of 10.67% for this year. The previously approved budget is now being formalized through this bylaw that's before you tonight. And like every year, there are a few additional items brought forward in the plan. These are typically projects that are carried over for completion from previous years. None of them have any impact on the tax increase. I'd be pleased to address any question that council might have other than what's in the report.
Thank you, Mr. Hissick. I'll turn to colleagues if there are any questions. Not seeing any, we can move forward to give 3 separate readings this evening. Councillor Gurnett.
Thank you, Mayor. I'll move that bylaw number 2288, financial plan 2025 to 2029, be given first reading.
Second.
We have it moved and seconded. All in favor? None are opposed. That carries.
I'll move second reading.
Second.
Moved and seconded. This is where we usually have discussion. Any discussion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All in favor? Thank you. None are opposed. That carries.
And I'll move third reading.
Second.
Moved and seconded, all in favor? Thank you, none are opposed, that carries. And that will come back to a future meeting for final adoption. Turning to item 5B, we have bylaw number 2289, tax rates 2025. I'll turn back to Mr. Hissick, please.
Thank you again, Mr. Mayor. With the budget for the year now set, a tax rates bylaw is required to ensure we bring in the required operating revenue to fund our financial plan. This bylaw sets the tax rates not only for the town, but several other jurisdictions as well. There's a table in the staff report that illustrates the level of control that the town has on all of the various levies on the annual tax notice. The municipal tax increase of 10.67 has been applied evenly to all classes of property. This equates to about $191 for the average resident, but that's just for the municipal portion. A table in the report also illustrates the full impact when all of their jurisdictions are factored in. There's an additional $135 for the average residents for a total cost of $327 this year. The main contributor to this larger than average increase in taxes for other governments is the regional transit levy, and this is similar to last year. It increased by $81 this year for the average household, or 35%. And this is primarily due to service expansion and capital plans for the Transit Authority.
Thank you, Mr. Hissick. Attorney colleagues, if there are any questions, seeing none, we can again proceed with on this motion or on this item with three separate readings. Councillor Novick.
Thank you. I'm prepared to move that bylaw number 2289, tax rates for 2025, be given first reading.
Second.
Moved and seconded, all in favor? Thank you. None are opposed, that carries.
Pushed it off. I move second reading.
Second.
Moved and seconded, any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? Sorry, please, Councillor Garnett.
Yeah, I just want to highlight sort of more comment here in terms of the regional transit levy, because I remember last year was a high, and I'm thank Mr. Hissick for providing some rationale, because I realized last year you had reached out and didn't get feedback when you were asking why the increase is so large, and so I looked back into our meeting from last year on April 22nd, and the actual increase for the last 2 years on our residents is 76.25% increase, and on our commercial properties 93.83%. I just note that because that is really large, and I find it a little troubling. I have to be honest, based on our current service levels, but hopefully with what's coming up on the agenda, our service will increase with the hub. So, but just it's something I noted from this year and last year, that those are really substantial increases, and they may not seem like a large dollar value, but it is a little frustrating as someone who has to set rates and have to discuss in council meetings why we're making our decisions to have these increases be this large and not have some kind of communication from the Transit Authority. So thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor. Seeing no further discussion, I'll call the question. All in favor? None are opposed, that carries.
I'll move third reading.
Second.
Moved and seconded, all in favor? That carries unanimous, thank you. We're next turning to item 6A, which is Development Variance Permit Application Number DV 100370 at 2499 Rothsay to relax front and rear setbacks to maintain the existing dwelling. We've had a presentation discussed at a previous meeting. Notice was sent to neighboring residents, and we have had the two submissions that were appended to our agenda this evening, and we do have a recommendation. Councillor Rintoul.
Thank you. I'll move approval of development variance permit application number DV 100370.
Second.
Moved and seconded. I'll turn to the movers.
Nothing, thank you.
Any further discussion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All in favor? That carries unanimous. Thank you. We're next turning to item 6B, which is Development Variance Permit Application Number DV 100371 at 9646 5th Street to allow for a heat pump to be sited within the exterior side yard. Again, we discussed at a previous meeting. We've had notices sent out to neighboring residents. We've had no submissions on this one, and we do have a recommendation. Or, sorry, we can now decide whether to approve or deny. Councillor Novak.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I will move that development variance permit application number DV 100371 at 9646 5th Street to allow for a heat pump to be sited within the exterior side yard be approved.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Just a note to council, given that the introduction has been read in terms of the variance permit application number and what it's for, when we're making the recommendation, we can just move to approve or deny. We haven't moved and seconded. All in favor? That carries unanimous. Thank you. And we're now looking, turning to item 7. We have the minutes from our regular council meeting of April 14th. I look for approval.
So moved.
Moved by Councillor O'Toole,
Second.
seconded by Councillor Garnett. Any errors or omissions? Seeing none, all in favor? None are opposed. That carries. Thank you. We don't have any business under number 8 or number 9 or number 10. We're turning to item 11, which is council reports. I'm turning now to Councillor Novak, who is our council representative to the Board of Trustees for the Vancouver Island Regional Library.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and I will try and keep this as short as possible. This is the VRL report for Sydney Council, April 29th. For 2025, there has been a new CFO hired. That position has been vacant for almost 2 years. They finally have a new person to fill this role, and so now all the staff shortages have been filled. The financial situation at VRL has stabilized with stronger policies regarding the funding of reserves. One of the things that is a sort of a current issue is that staff are reviewing tariff threats, as a large percentage of English books are published or printed in the US, even if they are often Canadian content. Often these books are printed in the US and then sent back here. So the effect of tariffs on library costs have not been fully costed out yet, or even been fully discovered, because this is a work in progress. But there is a team of people looking at this. VRL is still trying to look for ways to increase provincial funding, as 96% of the funding is from municipal governments and only 4% from the province. There are resolutions before UBCM to try and increase this level of funding from the provincial government. One thing that is a contemporary issue is that some branches are seeing big increases in security costs, partly because of the homeless problem in some of the larger communities. This has resulted in unbudgeted security costs, which invariably have to be borne by the organization as a whole. And last, but certainly not least, we've just received news this week that the Executive Director, Ben Hyman, has accepted the position of CEO and Chief Librarian of Vancouver Public Library. We wish him much success with this new role. It's quite a significant role, but unfortunately it's a big loss for VRL. And at the upcoming executive meeting in May, we'll start to look at putting together a recruitment process for a new executive director, and to nominate or name somebody to be the interim executive director until the search process has been completed. And I'm quite happy to answer any questions if there are any.
Thanks for the update, Councillor Novak. I'll turn to colleagues if there are any questions. Not seeing any. Thanks again for the report. We're next turning to committee reports, and under 12A we have the Sandwich Peninsula Accessibility Advisory Committee minutes from the March 27th meeting. We're receiving those on our agenda this evening by being published with the agenda. There are 3 recommendations coming out of from that meeting, and I'll turn to our representative on that committee, Councillor O'Keefe.
Thank you, Mayor. First, I'll just wanted to highlight one of the items that we discussed at the meeting, which was the on-street accessible parking standard update. And I just wanted to comment that, so this was something that staff was developing with support from SPAC members and with Watt, who had been working on this as well, starting back in November. And just wanted to mention that SPAC provided a lot of good feedback, which will be incorporated into the standard. And also wanted to comment that SPAC members were very appreciative of staff efforts to actually went on a field trip with one of the SPAC members to go and look at potential good spots, you know, to put online parking on the street. And so thank you to staff for making that special effort. Is greatly appreciated. And from that discussion arose the first recommendation, which I'll read in, which is that when the municipalities of District of North Saanich, District of Central Saanich, and the town of Sidney are updating parking or fees bylaws, that the fines for inappropriate use of accessible parking spots are made consistent across all three municipalities, and to be at minimum the amount defined by the province or higher.
Second.
We have it moved and seconded. Any discussion?
As I say, this came about during the presentation staff made on the accessible parking. SPAC members were very supportive of what Sidney staff were doing in this regard, and so the recommendation came that we should have some consistency across the other municipalities, hence the recommendation.
Thank you. Councillor Novak.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to staff, I'm not sure who's responsible for this, but perhaps somebody can answer. Does Robbins Parking actively enforce the use or the improper use of disabled parking spots?
Through to Councillor Novak, they do in the downtown core where they enforce parking. Any accessible parking spaces outside of the downtown core is not something that they would enforce.
Thank you. And how would the use of accessible parking spaces be regulated, if at all, on private property or on private plots?
Through to Councillor Novak, that's up to the private property owner to, if they wanted to have their own parking control or parking enforcement on that site.
Does a private individual actually have the right to, I don't even know how it would be affected, but how would they, you know, say they found somebody who was parked illegally in a disabled spot on their property? What would the process be to either ticket that person or that vehicle or have it removed?
Through to Councillor Novak, we can look into that and get back to you on that, but I'm fairly confident that a private property owner could have a vehicle towed if it was parked illegally on their lot.
I guess my concern simply is that if we're going to have these types of resolutions passed, that we should make sure that we at least have the ability to enforce them both on public and private lots. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
So before going to the next councillor, I'm going to turn to staff with regards to the differences between public property and private property. Might turn to Ms. Clary, please, or Mr. Edwards.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. The municipality doesn't have the authority to impose fines or ticketing or the like on private property.
Please.
Thank you. So how would a private individual enforce the use of a disabled parking spot on his or her property?
That's up to the private individual. So, for example, the Save on Foods property has its own control and regulation of its own parking lot, and it's not subject to the municipal bylaws and or fining provisions for parking. So it would be up to the individual private property owner to implement their own policies on their lot, and that might include towing the vehicle or other measures perhaps.
So if we adopt this resolution and the next time we do update bylaws, we do what is suggested in this resolution, it would only be for publicly owned parking lots and not for any private lots or private accessible spaces at all.
Correct.
Correct. Thank you, Mr.
Thank you, Councillor Novick. I'll turn to Councillor O'Keefe.
Thank you. Just on that point, I believe it's an infraction under the Motor Vehicle Act for an individual to park in any accessible space, whether it's public or private. And the RCMP, I believe, enforcing the Motor Vehicle Act can ticket. So say in the instance of people parking in a spot at Save On Foods, that they're not displaying an accessible pass, that could be reported and they could be ticketed, is my understanding on that.
Thank you. And so we do have the motion on the floor. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? That carries unanimous. Thank you. Councillor O'Keefe to the second
Okay.
part two.
The second one is that the municipalities of the District of North Saanich, District of Central Saanich, and the Town of Sydney invest more in promoting National Accessibility Awareness Week by using more channels to engage more people, such as through social media, Peninsula News Review, and Seaside Magazine.
We have that moved
Second.
and now seconded. Any discussion?
Yeah, this just came about from members in that I think Sydney does a pretty good job actually in terms of getting the word out on this, but it's not consistent in other municipalities. So the desire was for all municipalities to sort of be upping their game in that regard. There was also comments that there was concern that the town does have an event every year that the Shoal Center looks after on our behalf. And there was members of the committee that were not aware that that was taking place. And so a desire to broadcast that more broadly so more people address that. I'll add that shortly after this meeting, which is almost 2 months ago now, I was in communication with our communications manager, and they've got some ideas on how they will do some additional awareness on this. So I think this is well in hand within Sydney anyways. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. And so, any further discussion? Councillor Novick.
I just, while I definitely support this in principle, I have a problem in that I feel that it's not worded strongly enough. There isn't enough in the way of direct action items. It's kind of vague, using more channels to engage more people and stuff.
Councillor, would you like to make an amendment?
I'm not sure how I would amend it, to be quite frank. Perhaps I would leave it to the mover to strengthen it a bit. But
Okay, I can pose that as a question or a comment through to Councillor O'Keefe, if you wish to answer.
So there was some discussion amongst committee members about, what it should entail, and whether committee members should get directly involved with the communication strategy. But I think in the end, the feeling was that all three municipalities have professional staff who do communications, and there's resources available in terms of messaging and different products for National Accessibility Awareness Week. So in the end, we felt it was best to leave it to the communication professionals in each municipality to decide what they thought was best in terms of the type of messaging they would set up, how to do that for their particular municipality. So that's why it was, left, it's not too prescriptive, just some suggestions made for consideration.
Thanks for taking the question, Councillor O'Keefe. Councillor Novak?
My only comment is that recommendation 3 is quite specific, and I would think encompasses recommendation number 2, because it's more directly, you know, addressing the question of what actually to do.
Okay.
But anyway, I'll leave it as is. I'm not sure that I'm maybe making a mountain out of a molehill.
Okay, well, with no amendment to consider, we appreciate your comment. And any further discussion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All in favor? That carries unanimous.
All right, and the last one is that the municipalities of the District of North Saanich, of Central Saanich, and the town of Sydney annually recognize and promote national accessibility awareness. And so it is similar to recommendation.
Second.
Sorry?
We'll take a seconder
Second.
before you
Yeah.
motivate.
Sorry,
We
I'm getting
appreciate,
ahead of myself.
we appreciate your enthusiasm.
Okay.
So we
Are
do
you
have
gonna
it,
second it?
we do have it moved and seconded. The floor is yours.
Okay, I can cut loose now.
To the mover.
All right, so it's similar to recommendation 2. The difference is recommendation 2 focused mainly on the communication aspect, that we wanted to get more communication out there using different methods. During that discussion, there was discussions with members and staff about what's an appropriate lead time that municipalities need in order to develop communication strategies and awareness campaigns for this week. And so it was felt that if it was part of the regular thing that we do every year, then staff already know that this is something we do every year, rather than SPAC having to bring it forward every year. I believe in Sydney, I think it is part of our regular communications at this time, but it wasn't for all municipalities. So again, just looking for that consistency.
Thank you, Councillor. Any further discussion? Seeing none. Oh, Councillor Duncan, please go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. Hold on, I'll preemptively turn off my video. I just want to clarify, I can't remember if it was the beginning of this council term or last one, we'd had a discussion about recognizing, you know, special weeks and days, and we were frequently asked to declare that the town would recognize it, and the town would have to have kind of an official proclamation that we recognized a week. And the council had kind of said, every week there'd be 4 or 5 potentially that would come, and so we weren't going to have official recognition of weeks. So I'm not sure if this is one that's kind of being grandfathered in. Obviously it was a former councillor on Sydney Council who really did a lot of work towards this, and this was one that we were going to kind of keep recognizing officially, or if this is one where it's just kind of saying we're putting this out in our communications, and because there are events with, say, the Shoal Centre and other organizations we support, that town staff will kind of assist in communicating that? Or is this something, again, where we're going back to kind of the official recognition? And I worried about if it's not something where we're kind of just continuing with the recognition of this week that has been, and just being better about communication, that will be opening a door to more organizations coming forward and saying, you know, promote our week, do this week, recognize this day. That becomes the overwhelm we tried to avoid before. And so I'm just wanting to kind of clarify what level of support and promote these recognitions are supposed to meet.
Thanks, Councillor Duncan, for raising that. And I can speak to close to the beginning of the last term, so that would have been late 2018 or early 2019. We did establish that we would no longer routinely do proclamations upon request from the numerous community organizations that were making such requests. Other municipalities, I'm not saying it's universal, but other municipalities had started to do this before us. I think in the 7 years there may have been one or two exceptions that I brought forward to council, but I might turn to Ms. Judson to confirm that the intent would be to use our communication channels rather than considering a proclamation.
Yes, our municipality keeps up a list of the different annual dates that we recognize, and then we also connect with other municipalities just to see where we sit. And so the town of Sidney, we actually keep it pretty minimal because it can become quite a blur if every week you're recognizing a different significant week. And so we do both Accessibility Awareness Week and also Accessible Parking Week that comes later in November. Other dates include the Truth and Reconciliation Day, but there's many others that larger municipalities like Victoria, they're often changing lighting and doing things to acknowledge other dates, and we keep ours pretty minimal, but there is a list, so it's not done ad hoc.
Thank you. I'm going to turn back to Councillor Duncan if you did have the floor.
No, thank you. That clarifies it for me. Thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Keith?
Yeah, thanks. I'll just clarify that, yeah, there's no proclamation, wanted here. And I guess I would add that what's different about this from other organizations is that we have an accessibility plan. And within that accessibility plan, we've identified our desire to raise awareness of accessibility in our community. It's part of something that we're focusing a lot of time on. We have an event that we want to publicize to get people out. So this is different significantly than other organizations that come in and want to make a proclamation about something. It's part of our ongoing efforts to support accessibility in our community. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Any further discussion? Seeing none, I'll call a question. All in favor? And that carries unanimous. Thank you. Thanks for taking us through those, Councillor Keith. We're now under staff reports, under item 13A, the Sydney Transit Hub Memorandum of Understanding. I'll turn to Ms. Clary for an introduction, please.
Good evening. I did want to let you know that Mr. Button is also here from BC Transit if you do have questions for him tonight. Just a bit of background. Concepts for a Sydney Transit Hub were presented to Council in June of 2024. You may remember at the time there were 3 different options for a transit hub at Bevan and 7th. At the time, Council endorsed the off-street design option, which is included in this package. BC Transit is now ready to proceed with the design phase of the project, which requires some more substantial investment for the actual design for hiring a consultant, and are requesting that the town enter into an MOU, a Memorandum of Understanding, before proceeding. The draft MOU is attached, and as well as a map showing potential future traffic movements in the area, just to clarify that for some councillors. I do want to note that before this meeting, there was a discussion among both parties, and we agreed that this could be discussed in an open public setting, and that's so the clause related to confidentiality is no longer needed for this. And we're here to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you, Ms. Clary. Could you please introduce our guest from BC Transit again?
Sure. This is Mr. Simon Button from BC Transit. He's the project manager on this job.
Good evening, Mr. Button. I would like to turn to Council and request a motion to invite Mr. Button into the meeting, and we could then ask questions.
So moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded. All in favor? None are opposed. That carries. Thank you. So thank you. I'll turn to colleagues if there are any questions of Ms. Clary or Mr. Button. I'll begin with Councillor Garnett.
Thank you, Mayor. Through you to staff. I have 3, and just want to confirm, and it's mentioned in the staff report about other priorities might get bumped in terms of, I know that question, there was a question asked earlier in the day from another councillor. I just want to be confident that, I realize this could take staff time, but I don't want something that's like higher priority that their community might want to see done that might be preempted because of something involved in this.
Through to Councillor Garnett, no, that was really put in there just to acknowledge that it does take staff time to work on these sorts of things, even though BC Transit's leading it. it's not like we've done an analysis to see what would get bumped and what wouldn't. I'm just saying there could be other things we could be working on if this weren't to happen.
Okay, thank you. As far as the actual, and I appreciate very much the arrows, because I know that was something I was looking for, like, how is this going to function? When I'm looking at the direction of the traffic, and I'm thinking of like our Christmas parade or our Canada Day parade, and any kind of significant event at Mary Winspear Center, and it would appear from what would this diagram showing is that there will be an increase in traffic load that will go to 5th and Bevan. So I just wonder about staff's comfortable with the increase in load in terms of how that intersection functions, and will we be keeping some kind of eye on potential problems and making adjustments if necessary in the future?
Through to Councillor Garnett, that could potentially happen. There is the alternate exit out of the Mary Winspear or employee parking lot, and we would look, staff have already talked about some potential options to alleviate the additional load that could be on Bevan and 5th, but we will look at that as we move forward in the design. And just in general traffic planning in Sydney, that we are looking for future improvements in the longer term as they're warranted, specifically along our major corridors of Resthaven and 5th Street.
Great. And one last, if I may, Mayor. With regards to the milestone target date, 4.6, part of the MOU, and appreciating that it's a non-binding schedule, but when I'm looking at the completion of a BC Transit business case, October 2026, my hope is that would be finished prior to that, because typically, well, this will be an election year, and typically meetings are not held in October. So I would prefer that this came before this council, given that the next council might be completely different, and to throw something on them and having to come up to speed with something that's so full, then I think it'd be a little unfair for a new council. So my hope is that you could get to something in maybe in September or earlier, if that's possible.
Mr. Butt?
Yeah, thanks, through Councillor Garnett. For us, the intention would be to get approval from council at an earlier date than that.
Okay.
We would get it we want to have it probably many months before we get to the process of actually documenting all of our costs. Within that schedule, it would likely be like the approval of the 30% or 60% design, so looking at January through to April of 2026. And at that stage, we would get the overall endorsement of the project, acknowledging that there's going to be smaller details that we will need to continue to figure out.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor. I'll turn to Councillor Rintoul next, and then Councillor Novak.
Thank you, Mayor. Through you to staff or BC Transit representative. First off, I guess my appreciation that you summarized the ongoing engagement that will continue around the project, including mail or drop-off letters at properties immediately surrounding the site. Because I do think the Mary Winspear Center had a delegation come forward the last time this was brought forward, perhaps with some concerns about losing some of the opportunity to exit the center through their main exit entrance at the roundabout, at their on-site roundabout. But as was noted by staff, we continue to have the option further to the east, to the right of the main entrance to utilize that exit in either direction. I take it there's no arrows down there, but that's the intent through to staff, that they'll continue to be able to turn left or right out of the Mary Winspear Center from that exit, correct?
That is correct.
Thank you. Also, just based on some previous communication from the public, it would appear to me that maybe the number of on-street bays have been reduced in this version, or at least perhaps one where there was a commercial loading zone that was retained. Is that correct? We had, I think it was a veterinarian service come forward with respect to their concern for the intended format. Was that addressed in this design?
Through the chair, the design that's up here is still the original one that was shown to you last June. So we haven't undertaken any additional design work since then. So we have heard of that complaint from the veterinary clinic owner, and it's those types of conversations that we would be looking to have with them and other stakeholders in the very near future and incorporate that into the next version.
So that bay that is identified here, the one furthest to the east on Bevan, I assume is the one that particular
Correct.
business owner was concerned with?
Yep.
And you're acknowledging there's an ongoing dialogue with that business owner?
We've received communication with them, and we will begin working with them after this MOU has been signed.
Thank you. And through the mayor to staff, slightly different nature of inquiry, and I think we had a brief discussion on this when this came forward as well, but and it may be more for planning staff with respect to provincial housing legislation and the classification of a transit hub, and if staff could perhaps reassure me there's no unintended consequences with respect to developing this transit hub in regards to potential implications for density at this location. And so I'll pause there. I don't recollection if it was based on infrastructure development, if it was based on frequency, or how that legislation read, but I'll pause there to staff, please.
I'll turn to staff. Please. Mr. Edwards.
Thank you, Mayor, through the Mayor to Councillor Rintoul. Unfortunately, we can't provide you with assurances as to what the province will or will not do or classify any kind of transit infrastructure. It's at their leisure that they may choose to do so. Our understanding and interpretation is that this would not trigger the Minister of Housing to identify this as a transit hub that would trigger the increased density allowances under their new legislation. But again, we can't provide assurances as to what the province may or may not do.
So I'll clarify that through staff, because I did, when this was on an agenda previously and pulled, I did make reference to bringing this question forward. Under the current legislation, is there not a definition there with respect to transit hub, and does this proposal meet that definition, or is this a scaled down version of that definition?
Turn to Mr. Button.
Yeah, through the chair. That's a question that we've been trying to work actively with the ministry to resolve those issues. What is known right now is that the establishment of a transit hub or any infrastructure changes did not automatically trigger any zoning changes. The ministry is currently looking at what the process would be to add future transit-oriented areas. And they have committed to us that they would be working with municipalities and other local governments to try to figure out what those criteria would be. At the stage it would be dominated by the service that's there, not the infrastructure. So it's about
level
the frequency
of service,
yeah,
as opposed to infrastructure. Okay, and from your recollection or staff's, does the existing legislation refer to a radius within a designated transit hub that would be included? So in other words, you're saying there's no obligation to visit zoning immediately, for example, but that if a developer came forward and wanted that to be reviewed, what is the radius from a transit location identified in the legislation currently?
I'll turn to Ms. Verhagen. Or Mr. Edwards.
It's 500 meters, but I don't know all the details of the defining characteristics of a transit hub that triggers that zoning change, but the sense that I have is that the volume of activity through this project wouldn't really be a trigger for that.
If I might add a comment, I can't recall what the timing was, but it was when sometime after the legislation came out, the province identified, and I don't know what the number was, but I think it was something like 20 transit hubs. So they just went ahead and announced the 20 locations of transit hubs. Said it was based on service levels, but didn't provide the details of what those service levels were. And the understanding, as Mr. Button said, was that there would be further consideration in terms of future designations of transit hubs, that it wasn't meeting necessarily criteria within the existing legislation. Is that accurate to some degree?
That sounds generally accurate to me, yeah.
Yeah, thank you. Councillor Joe?
Thank you, I'll yield.
Thank you. Have Councillor Novick next.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and through you to staff, and I'm not sure who's best to answer this question. I'm looking at item number 3 in the MOU, talks about project budget and cost sharing. It does say that BC Transit and Victoria Regional Transit Commission will fund the planning and design work for the scope listed in section 2, which is great. But I have gone through the MOU and through the report, and perhaps I'm not reading it properly, but I don't really see where or even if or how the actual construction cost of the project will be appropriated, and will the town of Sidney be responsible for any of the construction costs, and if so, when will we know that?
I'll turn that question through to staff or Mr. Button.
Yeah, through to Councillor Novak. So this MOU is specifically for the design phase of the project, so that's perhaps why you don't see the details about construction. The intention is for the Regional Transit Commission and BC Transit, or I guess funding from the province, to fund the construction of the project. There are occasionally exchange projects like this where the municipality identifies needs that aren't core requirements for the project. For example, upgrading underground utilities, which could be, those costs could be borne by the municipality. So far at this stage, working with staff, they have not identified anything that would be out of the ordinary and would be the town's responsibility.
So that basically means town of Sidney would not be responsible for any of the costs associated with this project that are not initiated by town of Sidney specifically.
Correct.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor O'Keefe.
Thank you, Chair. A few questions. First, I'll start with the project scope in the MOU, and it talks about some things that will be part of the design, and then 2.2 talks about the design will consider refining the preferred concept to potentially include, and then it's got some other things there. The things that I'm wondering about is the bike racks and bike storage, also the car sharing, and possibly a pickup and drop-off zone. And what it would take to incorporate that into the primary design rather than maybe we'll do these things. And my rationale for that is that when this was, when we looked at the different options, as I recall, there was this option, and then there was a highway option. And the highway option, when I reviewed the feedback from the Peninsula Local Area Transit Plan, is that this option from the public was actually least desired. The public favored a spot on the highway. But when we discussed it before, my understanding is that staff and BC Transit felt this location was better because it provided more opportunities for multi-mode transportation. So that means bikes, that means place to drop off cars, place to drop off people. So it seems to me that, well, for me anyways, that was a selling feature because I wasn't initially too keen on this spot. But if we can do things to get people onto buses, I recognize that that's a good thing. But I think we need to make it easy for them to do so. And also when I was reviewed the minutes of the Regional Transit Commission, and it was also sold to them that the reason we're doing this, it's multi-mode transportation. So I'm just feeling that in order for it to be truly multi-mode, those are things that I would like to see incorporated in the primary design, rather than, maybe we might consider them later. And just if you have any comment on that.
Yeah, of course. Through to Councillor O'Keefe. I would love to include all of this. And I think the main thing is we often run up in restrictions on how much space we have, right? If we try to do A, B, C, D, E, and we also try to, limit the number of the reduction in vehicle parking and things like that. So that's going to be, I think, the main thing that'll show up in the next time we come to council for an update is what out of this lift have we managed to fit in. So I see it as like, how much can we fit in? I don't necessarily see these as kind of like nice to have items.
Okay, I guess maybe a question to staff in terms of on our side of the equation. I think staff mentioned that maybe we could donate a couple of the parking spots towards some of this. So, or is some of this feasible then to include in that primary design rather than let's see if we might be able to do it later?
So one of the requests of BC Transit initially was to retain as many parking spaces as possible in this parking lot. So you can see there's a row of, I think it's 12 parking spaces retained. But if we were given direction to, prioritize some of these other items on the list, we can definitely work, as we're working through the design, we can work with BC Transit to incorporate more of those, and potentially, if we had to, remove some of those off-street parking spaces instead.
Okay, and so if we wanted to say, include those three elements into the primary design, should we make a motion to that regard to amend the MOU, or that you will just take that under advisement as you proceed with? And just wondering what appropriate means or process would be.
I just want to interject for one moment. Could you
Okay.
just refer to the item, the paragraph number in the MOU? Again, please.
Item 2.2. So there's 2.27, which talks about bike racks and storage, and 2.28, which is a car share parking.
So there are 10 items under 2.2.
Yeah, but I'm not purporting to add all of those things in. I'm just focusing in on the bike racks and storage and the car share parking stall, because those are the things that I think adding those things in makes it truly a multimodal transit hub. Without those things, it's just buses coming in and out. And if one of the things that we're wanting to do is to get people to mode shift, as we say, we're going to need to provide some sort of amenities and incentives. Most of the people that live in Sydney that might use that fast bus to get downtown, they don't live in close proximity to that transit hub. They live in my neighborhood and different places around town. And so for them to, when I think about when I was working downtown, if you take the bus, you got to wait for the number 72, which is not really frequent service, and take that into Sydney, and then wait for the number 70, I guess. So what I'm saying is, by offering these other things like car share parking stalls, bike racks and storage, there's an option there for people to ride their bike, leave it there, get on the bus and go. So that's kind of what I'm thinking.
Okay, so what I'm hearing, and please clarify, is that while there are 10 items under 2.2, you're drawing attention to 3. I've understood from where we've understood, I think from Mr. Button, that in the next stage, all 10 of these will be considered. There's things like drinking fountain, street furniture. Some of these things will likely make it into the final design. I'm not gonna speculate which they are, but you're indicating a priority. One of the possibilities, and I will turn to staff and also to Mr. Button, is we could amend the MOU to leave this wording as it is, and add with 2.22, 2.24, those 3 items being considered the priority of those 10 items. Mr. Edwards?
I think it would be council putting forward the recommendation to amend the MOU. Council doesn't have the unilateral authority to amend the MOU. It also requires BC Transit to agree to an amendment. So it would be council making a recommendation to include these elements as primary design considerations.
Making a recommendation.
Yeah.
No, that's helpful, thank you. And
Okay.
Ms. Clary?
Sorry, I did want to also bring to your attention that right now the town uses Moto Car Share. They're the only car share currently operating in Sydney, so we would also need their agreement that they they feel like the usership is high enough to put a vehicle at this location as well.
An important consideration. Sorry, you do have the floor, Councillor Keefe. I'll let you continue.
Yeah, so I guess, I would propose to make a motion at some point, but I think we're just at questions now, or if I'm thinking along those lines.
So we have a
Is
staff,
it-
we do have a staff recommendation to approve the memorandum of understanding as presented. We could have a motion arising to the effect
Okay.
that Mr. Edwards described,
Okay,
and we can
we'll leave it, okay.
minimize the wordsmithing of that.
Sure,
when we
right,
come to it.
okay. So I'll move on then from that topic. And I wanted to talk a bit more about communication and stakeholder engagement. And I had asked about who do we see as being affected stakeholders. My understanding is it's businesses and property owners immediately surrounding the transit hub. I got the impression, reading the MOU and the report, is the feeling that there's already been enough discussion on this through the Peninsula Area Transit Plan, and therefore we're not going out to the broader community, or what's our rationale in terms of what seems to be a limiting the communication and engagement to just the very specific area.
Through to Councillor Keith. I think we feel like through the previous engagement, through the local area transit plan and conversations we've had here, that there's a general desire to have the hub in this location. I think what we're trying to do is try to confirm that there is an acceptable design, as well as incorporate feedback from stakeholders about the design. So we would be, of course, making any kind of the engagement materials publicly available. Anyone would be able to kind of get a hold of them. We can advertise them. We'd love if the Town of Sydney advertises our webpage as well. We would directly reach out to the stakeholders immediately surrounding the area, as well as any kind of larger stakeholders that we feel would have a kind of a greater interest in transit. So we would happily have a presentation and conversation with, groups like the BIA, the Mary Winspear Center, kind of whoever is interested.
Okay, yeah, I guess I lean towards us doing a bit more than what's proposed. My rationale for that is what.
Sorry, before rationale,
Okay,
I'm not suggesting you make amendment first, but if you could describe what you're
right, okay, so,
requesting,
yeah, so what I would.
what could be a recommendation in a motion arising?
Yeah, sure. So I would be hoping that we would have, whether it might be possible to have a broader engagement. When I looked at the
More specific, Councillor O'Keefe?
okay, so that I would be looking to, for us to have an opportunity for the general public to know what's going on there. I think it's something that will be of high level of interest to them. And in the previous engagement, which was I think a few years ago. Although, you know, in the staff report, it says there was 362 respondents to the survey. When you look at that in more detail, what you'll see is that only 16% of the residents were from Sydney.
Councillor O'Keefe, I'm going to interject for just a
Okay.
moment. You're making a suggestion and then motivating for it.
Sorry.
If you would like to pose it
Okay.
as a question to either staff or Mr. Button, and then we can consider it further as a possible motion arising.
Sure. So just wondering what opportunities might be available for additional engagement to the general public, and instead of just the immediate area, the area I would see along Bevan from Mary Winspear Center down to Fifth. So, because all those will be impacted. And then also those businesses in the area of Beacon and Seventh, like Thrifty Foods, there's that office building, some other places there. So whether that's something that might be feasible or not.
Yeah, through to Councillor O'Keefe. Within the immediate area, you know, we haven't decided on a specific radius, but what you described, I would consider falling within the immediate area, like within 300 meters, perhaps, which would probably cover all those. You know, we would be open to having other things and learning what the expectations would be like for similar projects in Sydney, whether it's, you know, a kind of a Zoom meeting for anyone that's interested. You know, we could have a table set up and say in front of Save on Foods, if they're a willing partner and they want to, you know, catch people while they're doing their grocery shopping, or kind of as they're heading into the store, or things like that are definitely reasonable things for us to do.
And so would there be an opportunity through the website or some other means for the general public to become aware of it and provide any comments that they might have?
Yes.
Okay, okay. And I guess final one on the in terms of the engagement is, as we mentioned earlier in the meeting, we have a committee focused on accessibility, and whether you might be interested in consulting with them to look at, you know, once you've got some sort of design in place, to have them take a look at it to identify any potential issues for them. Is that something you might consider?
Yeah, absolutely. I think we would work with staff to identify groups like that that we'd want to kind of engage perhaps at a higher level.
Okay, that's great.
That sounds very reasonable.
Yep, okay, good, thank you. Just this question, I guess, for staff, in terms of our owner representative. So I understand that the owner representative, I think, will be Director of Engineering, and I was just curious about at what points in the process council would be updated. And so I understand that from staff that we would get an update at the 30% design stage. And I'm wondering, would we also be looking at the plan once the business case is developed? Is that something that would come to us as well? And whether we would get a report out on what the engagement has looked like?
I'll turn to Mr. Button or to Ms. Clary.
Through to Councillor O'Keefe. In the present schedule that's laid out, we would, at a minimum, engage the council at the 30% design stage. That's when you get most of the big pieces set up. You kind of know, you know, is there a car show start there or not, bike parking, yes or no. And then further on, we are happy to keep you updated and check in, although the granularity of detail will increase. So it may not be details that are as critical.
Sure.
Yeah.
Okay, that's good. That's good for me, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Duncan, I did note your hand raised a few minutes ago. Please go ahead, and then I will follow. I think you might be muted, Councillor. Thank you.
Sorry.
You're going to have to try the video option already.
I guess I'm following up on council.
Okay, if you'd like to start again.
Is that better?
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
Thank you.
I'm still getting the unstable network connection. I love the face I was making as my video froze, though. I'm going to go back all the way to the beginning. I know questions were already asked about item 4.6 and completion dates, although mine started with the fact that the MOU execution was listed in here as March, and now of course it won't be feasibly until May, but the anticipated timeline remains not only October 2026, but it sounded as though it was perhaps intending to try to be compressed even further to make sure that there were decision points for council that came before that. Is that correct?
Mr. Butt?
Yes.
To staff or Mr. Button?
Yeah. There was a delay in being able to attend this meeting, which explains that the schedule doesn't quite make sense. The first two items there, the execution of the MOU and the stakeholder engagement, would be delayed. Stakeholder engagement could potentially occur still in June, I would say, at this stage. I would say generally the rest of the schedule would still be generally accurate.
Okay, thank you. And I guess going back to at the beginning of our meeting, Councillor Garnett had noted that the tax increase that's related to BC Transit, and of course the region is really trying to build a service, and I can understand why there would be expenses with that, and we have a very ambitious transit goal. But I guess to go back to Councillor O'Keefe's comments on section 2.2, I would look personally towards using transit's best experience on what users need there. I've never seen, like, say, a drinking fountain at a transit hub. There may be elsewhere in the region, but I've never noticed it. I don't think a car share, as has been pointed out, the Moto would have to have the demand required in order for them to want to put a car there. But it seems like that would be less important to have directly at a bus stop than to have the capacity to switch between bus and bike, based on the size of Sydney and the type of, I think, staffing needs that we might have for people commuting in or out. So my, I guess, feedback at this point, I feel having a too specific motion about what would be priorities based on what councillors in Sydney think may overly constrain what happens there, because I feel that staff and transit will have better expertise about what their ridership are actually using. The one comment I would have is that the comments previously about having areas where people can easily drop off other riders, I think may be more critical in this spot simply because of the impact on surrounding businesses. I'm looking particularly at thinking there may be an impact on the Mary Winspear with people pulling into that roundabout to drop off riders if there is not a clear place for it to go. I know at other bus stops what usually happens is people just pull right up into the bus parking zone and cause a conflict with the bus. So kind of really paying attention to that, I think, will be extra critical here, just knowing that because we did have a delegation from the Mary Winspear before. And I guess my last question is, I mean, it's very general, not even just to this one, is that when doing communications about new transit hubs or really any of the changes to BC Transit, does BC Transit use the ad space they have on their buses themselves? I mean, UMO, the switch to UMO was extremely well advertised on the buses themselves, just to ensure that the people who are actually already riding the bus can see what's coming next and engage about how they would use that, if they would use that, and what their thoughts are.
Through to Councillor Duncan.
My apologies, I may have cut out at the end.
Yeah. I suppose that there's a variety of ways that we can advertise this. So I think kind of right at this stage, we want to kind of inform people that we're planning a transit hub, we're developing a design, and we're interested in feedback. You know, at this stage, we still don't have confirmation that the project will happen. We don't have a firm cost and scope that we can commit to building. Advertisements perhaps on the buses themselves. That's not something that we've done for infrastructure projects before. The way our transit scheduling works is we don't right now have a clear, there's not consistent buses on consistent routes. So we put up advertising about this project, and that bus could end up, operating in Souk and Colwood predominantly for several months. So there's a variety of avenues that we can use as our usual ones, and we'd love to leverage the town's communication channels as well to get the public informed about this.
Okay, no, that makes sense. I guess then it could be on the bus stops themselves.
Yeah.
I know UMO had those as well, so.
Yeah.
But no, thank you for that answer.
Thanks, Councillor Duncan. I have a couple of items, or a couple of questions. My first is the correspondence received this evening as during agenda review. I'm not sure I understand, looking at this map, what the question is, but I will pose the question since it was submitted to council. And that is that it so far looks like both north and south rapid bus lines will be using the same bus stop bus bays, which I worry will lead to people accidentally taking the bus in the wrong direction. Could you comment on that?
Not sure for this. So right now, how the design is set up, if you look at the most northern yellow bus you see, that bus stop is set up to have the Route 70 stop at it, which is the primary route between downtown and Schwartz Bay. That bus collecting passengers there in both directions. So whether you're going to Schwartz Bay or you're going to Saanich, Victoria, that same bus stop would be used. So it's a little bit different. We do have it in some other exchanges. An exchange like that, this was built like that. We would have, our staff there for the first few days, getting people familiar with it. We don't want people heading in the wrong direction. There may be opportunities to adjust that so that different directions stop in different locations. But again, we're always kind of dealing with limited space. So there might be other trade-offs that we would have to make in order to accomplish that goal.
Thank you for the answer, and with Transit's experience, we hope that would be accommodated. The next is I'd like to turn to staff, because we know when this came to us, or that the current situation is roughly 30 parking spots, or town public parking spots are in that parking lot. I don't know the exact number, but it's roughly that. And we see that 12 parking spaces are remaining. Can staff speak to the intent? I mean, it does mention 12 parking stalls, 12 parking stalls, including accessible parking and electric charging retained. Given we have the large parking lot in the Mary Winspear Center, and the electric charging has moved from this parking lot to there, is electric charging still intended to be retained here?
BC Hydro does intend to keep that charging station remaining there at this point. There's just some regulations they're working through with the charging stations within the community. They're looking to maybe make some adjustment to reopen this. So it's just temporarily out of service, but they are proposing to reinstate it.
Thank you. Do we have any input with BC Hydro on whether they're retained in that location or not?
Those locations were part of an agreement, so that agreement would have to be reopened, and both parties would have to agree to any changes to that. And I think it was an extended 10-year period, I believe, for operating those chargers at that location.
Okay, so I can certainly see the need for, if there were a drop-off, that there would be need, you would want to have drop-off for both able-bodied and accessible, not necessarily parking, but accessible and regular drop-off. The intent of having, my first question to staff is, have staff given consideration? I mean, I think the length of parking now is 2 hours in that parking lot. Is that the intention to retain? Would the intention be to retain 2-hour parking there?
Through the mayor, we're not anticipating changes to the parking restrictions in that lot, so at this time, they would stay as they currently are.
Okay, I think given the other 10 uses that are listed within the MOU to be considered, and that a drop-off, Councillor has spoken previous to me, drop-offs will occur, and it's gonna happen in the Save On Foods parking lot, or it's gonna happen in the traffic circle at the Mary Winspear Center, or heaven forbid, right on Bevan or the main street. So, given the number of parking spaces that are in the Mary Winspear lot, and given we are making a significant infrastructure investment is being made here for rapid transit and trying to have multimodal connections, it's really a question mark for me whether we retain parking there. And I don't know what the appropriate stage is. I know we've had some discussion, you know, when transit first came and presented to us. But just looking at the area, you know, functionally within a radius of 100 meters, there are going to be drop-offs, and you know, do we want to accept that they're going to be in the private business parking lots or our community center traffic circle? So I don't know. Is this something council can give input by resolution again as a recommendation for consideration, or is there a further time for us to be considering this?
Through to the mayor, if council does agree on direction to remove the public parking spaces from this lot, that would be really helpful to know now, because it will provide more flexibility in the design stages of the project. I just looked up the hydro agreement. We did enter into it in 2017, so I believe it is a 10-year term as well, so it would be up in 2 years. So we could start discussing with hydro if the desire is to just remove all public parking in this lot, what that may look like from a BC Hydro fast charger perspective.
Okay, yeah, again, given the investment in the chargers and looking at the use of those chargers already since they've been installed is impressive. But I'm going to pose a question to Mr. Button with the hubs you've located, transit hubs you've located in similar circumstances, surrounded by businesses or community centers and that sort of thing. Is it usual to have public parking of a limited duration? Currently, it's 2-hour parking in such close proximity to the hub itself.
Yeah, to the mayor. I think when I'm thinking about our downtown exchanges throughout the province, it is fairly common, just because in a downtown environment you're going to have hopefully high quality transit, and you're also going to have parking nearby, whether it's immediately next door or it's around the corner on street. It probably varies. I think in this location there certainly could be some space to be gained if not all that parking was retained, or if some of it was intended for a shorter duration. There are still some commercial loading bays in that area, so we still need to accommodate room for large trucks to get in there. So it's not like we could take over all that space right up until the building. But certainly it would provide more space for other amenities if that was the direction.
Okay, thank you for that, and I'll leave my questions there. Councillor O'Keefe?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. A couple more, if I may. So there was a reference from colleagues earlier about BC Transit knowing, what's the best stuff to put in here. You referenced in the MOU the BC Transit's on-street infrastructure design guide. So I took a look at that, and it looks like it does outline a number of things. And one of the things I see in terms of amenities is for a transit exchange that it's recommended. So am I understanding the chart correctly that bike parking would be recommended under the on-street infrastructure design guide?
That's correct.
Okay. And then just another question. They also make reference of a passenger landing pad. Does that just mean when people step out of the bus, or is that a sort of a drop-off pickup? I'm not sure what the definition of that is.
It's a fancy word for a sidewalk. Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
You
Yeah.
thought there were people being ejected?
It essentially means a clear area immediately next to the bus.
Okay.
yeah.
I just wondered whether
Yeah.
it meant like a drop-off area for
Okay, yeah.
passengers. Okay. Yeah, that's good for me. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any further questions? I think we've all spoken once. Thank you for taking our questions. I think we'll now turn to the staff recommendation. Councillor Novak.
I'm happy to make the recommendation that the memorandum of understanding with BC Transit relating to Sydney Transit Hub be approved as presented.
Do we have a seconder?
Second for discussion.
Councillor Novak.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I've gone through this MOU and it seems quite reasonable. A lot of the design criteria are all items that we've talked about. I think we need to leave it to the pros to come up with a preliminary design. The milestone grid does bring this back to us for approval at the 30% stage. I think that's the point at which we would make more serious recommendations. I think staff have heard some of the concerns that we have. I'm sure they will take it back with them when it comes to executing the design program. I don't think it's necessary for us to spell it out in detail now because a lot of the design process will be involved with seeing what fits in the space and how it can fit and how the BC Transit processes can be accommodated there. I think this is really just a very preliminary part of the program, and it gives BC Transit and the I'm sorry, what are they called? The Victoria Regional Transit Commission, the ability to sort of get this into gear and to come up with some preliminary proposals with greater detail. So I'm happy with it as it is. You know, I think you could wordsmith this ad infinitum and not get something that's going to cover all the bases. You got to start somewhere. And I think once they come back to us with a more concrete design, then I think that would be the time to start looking at it in depth and looking for more specific adjustments. So I'm happy with it as it presently stands. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll turn to the seconder.
I have nothing really to add at this point. I just want to listen to the rest of my colleagues. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor O'Keefe.
Thank you. I'm generally okay with it. However, I think this is the point where I think if there's some significant things that we want in this hub to make it a truly multimodal hub, I think now is the time to do that, rather than maybe seeing it come later. So I'd be more interested in whether it's making an amendment to the motion or doing it as a motion arising to incorporate just a couple things: the bike racks and storage and a drop-off pickup area for passengers. And I think it's important to signal those things, if council agrees that those are important components, to signal to BC Transit and staff now, because those are going to take up space. And I think it's harder to kind of fit things in after the fact. So I think it's important to convey that information now and include that in that preliminary concept design so they can work on it now. rather than later. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. I'll turn to Councillor Rintoul.
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, I mean, I think this is a positive development for transportation and transportation opportunity and public transportation opportunity. I'm not interested in schooling BC Transit or our engineering staff on what specific facilities this may need. I think they get that they want people to use this, and the MOU outlines you know, where those priorities are, and if they fit, they're going to be there, and I would leave it to them happily to determine which of those elements are most sufficient or most needed by the user community. I think that's BC Transit's job, not mine. But I have a lingering concern around the whole provincial housing legislation and the transit hub designation, and so I don't know, you know, do I sit here and smile at what I just said, and I'm happy to, you know, to see this opportunity, this piece of infrastructure move forward, but then at 30%, maybe when we get some more clarity from the province around that and what that means and what that looks like specifically, you know, then I get cold feet. So I am hesitant based on the insight that we have today and what those implications may be down the road, and I'm a little concerned about unintended consequences on the zoning side for this. So I'll pause. I'm not sure which way I'll vote on this, but I'm acknowledging that we could see this develop to 30%. I get more insight from staff in the province, and then I do a U-turn. So I'll put that out there and pause at that point, Mayor.
Thank you. I'll speak next. I'm supportive of this, and I'll just note that while speakers have already spoken as to whether or not we should give further direction with regards to amenities, that's not for, while this motion is on the floor, we can consider that as motions arising as we see fit. So I'm not going to comment on that at this time. With regards to housing, the housing or the hub, while this is identified as a hub, I did, when the locations were announced by the province of what the transit hub locations were, I mean, these were very busy locations in the Lower Mainland. And to be honest, I just can't recall what was in Victoria and or Langford, sort of thing. I don't know if Mr. Button knows if any of those 20-some locations are in,
I believe at least the legislature exchanged, and
right.
Victoria and Royal Oak.
Right,
Royal Oak and Highway 17 were. I believe there might have been one other one. I can't recall right now.
Yeah. So while I appreciate the language is hub, I think the service levels that were associated with what the province identified as hubs in that much higher density were likely significantly greater than this one, but we don't know. But I'm supportive of this moving forward to the next stage. Not seeing any further speakers, I'll look to call the question. All in favor? Councillor Duncan, Councillor Duncan in favor?
Yes. Sorry, I'm cutting out.
Thank you. Opposed? Councillor Rintoul is opposed. The motion carries. Councillor, just before going to potential motions arising, I would like to make a motion arising, which I think might help any possible future motions arising. And my motion arising is that council has a willingness to forego the parking spaces in favor of the facilities, additional facilities as identified in item 2.2 of the MOU. Is there a seconder?
I'll second that for discussion at least.
Yeah, again, to some colleagues' comments, I would prefer to leave this to BC Transit and our engineers in terms of what design elements change in this in going to the 30% design. There are 10 elements there. We've spoken more in favor of some than others. I could certainly do that. But I think given the experience BC Transit has in other hubs and giving our engineering experience, I think that space would be valuable to be as directly associated with the transit hub. I'll elaborate on a previous comment in terms of not where the drop-offs are, but what are the 30 parking spaces that are there today, or what are these 12 parking spaces serving? Quite frankly, they're serving people who want to use the businesses in the immediate area, or I've parked there to go to a performance in the Mary Winspear Center. I think, there's other options with regards to the businesses, and for the businesses or Mary Winspear Center, there is the substantial parking that we've provided within the Mary Winspear lot. So I see these being much greater value associated with multimodal transportation in the transit hub. I'll turn to the seconder.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I tend to agree. I truthfully don't really understand why we're going to the huge expense of designing a transit hub and then putting a bunch of parking spaces there when we have a tremendous parking lot right across the street, and certainly as accessible to the hub as these are. I would much prefer to see that space utilized as passenger pickup, passenger drop-off, bike storage, MODA or Moto car park, again, to enhance the multimodal capability of the hub rather than just having some additional parking. I'm not sure it's necessary. I mean, if you look at the design that's on the screen, it is literally surrounded by parking spaces. And it would seem to me to be a waste of a very valuable resource to simply add more parking spaces to it. So I would definitely support this, although I suspect that perhaps BC Transit would take a second look at this and say, yeah, why are we putting parking spaces when there's parking spaces all around? There are all these other things that are far more critical to the functioning of the transit hub than simply having more parking spaces there. So I'll certainly support this motion.
Thank you, Councillor. And just to provide a little clarity, we've talked, it was mentioned about putting parking there. We're actually retaining, in this design, we're retaining approximately 1/3 of the existing parking. We're not putting new parking there. We're retaining a portion of the existing parking. But thank you for your comments. I'll turn next to Councillor Gurnett.
Thank you, Mayor. My concern with that particular motion is the removal of the accessible parking space, given where its proximity would be to getting on a bus. So I wouldn't be comfortable with that aspect. I think it's important to have an accessible parking space in such close proximity to a bus stop, or a transit hub in this case. And I wouldn't want to see that gone. So I struggle with it on that sense. Thank you.
If I can just ask for clarification, we understand that the parking is for 2 hours now, and so you'd like to retain a 2-hour accessible parking space.
I'm not going to get in the heads and determine how long people need a space for, but it is an accessible spot for somebody getting on a bus. Maybe they're just going somewhere into Saniston and coming back and doing shopping or going to an appointment or something. I think we're going through the process of having accessible parking looked at in our community. I think anytime we have a space and we remove it, that's not a good way to move forward. Thank you.
No, thank you. I appreciate the comment, and the motion, I think, provides for that. It's a willingness to forego the parking in the design, and if transit and or staff feel, for example, accessible parking, and so we appreciate your input into that part of the conversation. Councillor Keefe.
Thank you. My preference would have been to, say what we would really like to see there with the bike racks and storage and drop-off area. Having said that, I think this motion, I think staff and BC Transit have heard a lot about the things that we would like to see there. And I think this motion will give them more flexibility to incorporate some of those things. And so what I would hope is that, based on what they've heard tonight about our wants for bike racks and drop-off zones and accessible parking, and with this extra space, that when we see that more detailed design, that those things would be incorporated. So I'm happy to just go with this particular motion and hope that we see some of those things incorporated with that extra space. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Seeing no further discussion, I'll call the question. All in favor? Councillor Duncan? Are you in favor or opposed? In favor? Thank you. We understand the technology. The motion carries unanimous. Thank you. Are there any other motions arising? Seeing none, we want to thank Mr. Button for attending this evening and taking all of our questions. And thank you to staff as well for the work that you've been doing with BC Transit and taking our questions as well. We're next turning to turn the page here. We're turning to item 13B, which is a tree removal request at 9421 Brookwood Drive. I'll turn to Ms. Clary, please.
Thank you. This tree removal request is for 2 Leyland cypress trees in the backyard of 9421 Brookwood Drive. These are the same species of trees that were brought forward during the last council meeting. They are fast-growing trees that have a short life and have a risk of losing large limbs without much warning as they age. These trees are located within the Qualsit environmentally sensitive area, so the homeowner is required to obtain a development permit minor to remove the trees as well. So he's been provided the opportunity or the information to connect with development services if this were to be approved by council. Staff are still working on an amendment to the bylaw as directed by council during the last meeting. However, this applicant wanted us to bring this forward tonight. And staff are recommending removal of both of these trees. One of them has a smaller diameter than the other, but the trees are, they've grown intertwined, so if one's removed, it will impact the health of the other tree. And I'm here to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you. I'll turn to any questions. If there are no questions, we do have the staff recommendation. Councillor O'Toole.
Thank you. I'll move that the request to remove 2 Leyland cypress trees from the backyard of 9421 Brookwood Drive be approved.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion? Councillor Garnett.
Thank you, Mayor. Having gone by the property and looked, there's definitely a risk to person and or property, so I will support the motion. And with the information that staff has provided and our town arborist, that there's large limb failures they're quite common in this particular species of tree. The only comment I would make is that it is concerning when we're removing trees, regardless of the species, when they're environmentally sensitive areas, in this case, a riparian area. So, I mean, it's just something to put on council's mind that as we look to develop under the new legislation in terms of proximity to environmentally sensitive areas and riparian areas, that we have the foresight to make sure that the building footprints are allowing trees to not run into conflict with homeowners and their homes. Thank you.
Thank you. Seeing no further discussion, I'll call the question. All in favor? Carries unanimous. Thank you. And we're next turning to item 13C, which is release of covenant 9429 Kenora Road. Our turn to Ms. Verhagen, please.
Thank you. Good evening. This is a request from the property owner at 9429 Kenora Road to release a covenant, which we had previously thought was already off the title. This covenant is on a portion of the property on the east side. This lot at 9429 Kenora is at the corner of Kenora Road and Frost Avenue West. So this covenant pertains to only a portion of the property eastward along Kenora Avenue West. As it says in the report, this was entered into by the town in 1980 as part of the Summergate development to secure this land for the use for storage of recreational vehicles belonging to owners and occupiers of the strata lots of Strata Plan 761, that being Summergate Village. The covenant does not require that the storage be provided free of charge or control rent rates to anything other than market rent for storage there. In 2022, council received a similar request from the property owner to discharge a similar covenant for the same thing on a different and adjacent portion of land. There was 2 strips of land right beside each other, 2 covenants, because at the time they were owned by 2 different parties. So those were both entered into. In 2022, council agreed to the discharge of the other covenant. At the time, staff reviewing the file thought this covenant we're talking about today was already off the title, so that's why it wasn't talked about then. This has come forward now to be released for the same reasons that were proposed in 2022. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you for the introduction. Now I'll turn to Councillor Garnett.
Thank you, Mayor. Through you to staff. We had a letter that was added onto the agenda from the Summergate Strata Council president. Speaking to, they weren't sure, the requested waiver that we asked for and had been received, they seem to be unclear what waiver that is. So I'm just seeking clarification.
Sure, thank you. Through to Councillor Garnett. So in 2022, Council's resolution on that request to release the other covenant is copied in this staff report, and it was given subject to a condition that prior to the town executing any discharge covenant documents to get that covenant off title, the property owner of 9429 Kenora provides to the town a waiver or release from the Strata Council of Strata Plan 761, that being Summergate Village, to waive any claim it might make against the town as a result of the town agreeing to the discharge. So the property owner did provide that statement from the Strata in 2022. I believe it said something to the effect that the Strata felt they could take no position in the matter. Now it's important to note that the covenants are between the owner of these pieces of land and the town. The Strata is not a signing party to the covenant. They have no control over whether it stays or comes off title. Perhaps that was why the Strata took that position, but yeah, thank you.
And if I may have a follow-up. So is it staff's position that we wanted a waiver or release from J122986, but we don't need the same thing for J055668?
Again, through the mayor, yes, that's our position. They already waived interest in the other covenant, and at the time we thought this one had already been removed from title. So.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Keefe.
Thank you. I guess I'm, just struggling in terms of, we have a letter from the Strata now, so whatever happened in 2022. And I remember we did have a discussion about whether that strip was included or not, because it didn't seem like it was. But staff's feeling was that it was included. And now that we're dealing with a separate covenant, a separate thing, it doesn't seem right that we would take a letter from 2 years ago applying to one covenant without doing the same for the second covenant. So if we required the property owner at Kenora to get clearance from the Strata in order to remove that covenant, okay, that's done, that's completed. Now we're dealing with a separate covenant. That letter that was provided before, as far as I can see, what we're saying is didn't apply to this covenant. We're having to do that as a separate transaction. So I guess I'm concerned that the Strata has expressed concern about releasing this. So I have concerns about releasing it, especially if they seem to be, although the covenant is between the town and the owner of Kenora, that the residents of Summergate were kind of the beneficiaries of that covenant. And we recognize that in 2022. And that's why we asked for clearance from them. So it seems like we should be doing the same again for this one.
If I may speak to that, through the mayor to Councillor O'Keefe, indeed it would be council's discretion if you wanted to make the same resolution as before to require that as a condition prior to the town executing any documents to release the covenant from title. Noting the comments in the letter that was received as a late item today, the letter writer indicates that in their opinion, the discharge of the covenant could have a significant effect on the most immediate neighbors. It could change property values. So the property here in question, 9429 Kenora, the whole of the property, including the area controlled by the covenant, is zone C3. That's a service station zone. The property, the whole thing is designated neighborhood commercial in the town's official community plan. The service station zone, C3, allows a service station, convenience store, gas bar, liquor store, and a dwelling unit. It allows one dwelling unit on the property. The maximum height in the zone is 2 stories. The neighboring property, the surrounding neighborhood to the north is allowed to be 3 stories in height, up to 4 dwelling units per property. The Summergate Village is that strata to the south and to the west of 9429 Kenora is controlled by the zoning on that property, which is 1 dwelling unit per lot. So the property is already zoned for the service station use. Recreational vehicle parking is the only use permitted on this strip of land here right now. So as far as what impact it could have on the property by removing the covenant, yes, it would open up that strip of land for development under that existing zoning. And council, if you wanted to make the resolution to require another letter from the strata, that would be at council's discretion to make that.
Councillor O'Keefe?
That's fine for now.
Councillor Rintoul?
Thank you, and just to clarify, through you, Mayor, to staff, and I know it has been stated, but the suggestion to request another waiver from the Strata Council, to be clear, we requested it in 2022, and they essentially returned no comment. It's got nothing to do with us response. Is that a fair assessment of the response we received in 2022 from Strata Council?
Sorry, could you repeat that understanding of what was received?
We requested a waiver or release from Strata Council at the time, but did we not get a response from Strata Council at the time saying, it's got nothing to do with us? It didn't say much more than that, did it?
That's right, yeah.
Okay, so I guess my point is, I don't know what we would expect differently other than this Strata Council seems to be suggesting, perhaps notice to adjacent properties would be appropriate. So my next question through the mayor to staff is, to release a covenant of this nature, is there precedent or procedure, policy normally where we would go to a period of notice within a certain radius if we were removing a covenant of this nature?
Through the mayor, we don't have any policy or bylaw about an appropriate radius for notification before the release of a covenant, but I defer to Ms. Nelson if she knows of anything, or Mr. Edwards.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. I'll turn to Councillor Novick.
Thank you. So looking at this letter, they state very clearly that they don't believe they have any legal authority to act on behalf of the strata owners regarding this matter. That's clear. The strata would have no jurisdiction related to the covenant land. However, they do say that that the discharge of the covenant could have a significant effect on the most immediate neighbors. It could cause a reduction in their property value and negatively impact their quality of life. My question to staff is, do we have any evidence, or has the strata owner provided any evidence that this is the case, or is this just speculative?
Again, through the mayor, I think that's speculative. There's no development applications for this property for 9429 Kenora. The town recently approved a development permit minor to change a door on the west face of the commercial building on the building, and that was the permit application that we had. That's all.
So there's no evidence to suggest that the contention by the strata that there could be a reduction in property values or negatively impact the quality of life is in fact a valid concern, something they're just saying. Thank you.
My understanding from the discussion is that if this covenant were to be removed, the property owner, while there is no application for redevelopment under current zoning, an application could come forward, the property could be developed, and the residents could consider that development is impacting the value of their homes. But, Ms. Verhagen or Mr. Edwards?
Sure, to your point, any property owner could submit an application at any time. I mean, if this covenant is lifted from title, the current property owner of 9429 Kenora could use the full extent of the property for any of the permitted uses in the zone, which I just listed a moment ago. Things related to gas stations, service stations, convenience store, liquor store, and one dwelling unit. Those uses could cover the full extent of the property as opposed to the full extent minus this little strip here.
I mean, if there was a development that required rezoning, I could see, more potential impact, but in this current scenario, the property's been zoned that for some time now, so. Mr. Edwards?
And additionally, I think there is some level of speculation going on because if the property were to be redeveloped, it doesn't necessarily result in a negative impact. There can be a positive impact too. Undoubtedly, there would be some impact, but whether it's positive or negative is hard to determine.
Thank you. Councillor O'Keefe, you had the floor?
Yeah, sorry, through you to Mr. Edwards or staff. When my understanding is that, so this covenant, the town required this from the developer of those Summergate lands years ago in exchange for them to allow development of those lands. So is there some sort of cost attached to that? Like when we ask developers as part of our approval for your project, we want you to provide, it's kind of like an amenity, I presume, that we want you to provide this strip of land in order to benefit the Summergate community or broader community. And so that's what the original intention was. And so the town gave the developer at the time the benefit, some sort of benefit to develop that property. So is there a financial component to this that now we're giving that up?
I don't presume to understand what the initial intents were behind creating the covenant and the agreement to allow for the covenant to be established. But from talking with staff and others, it's my understanding that when it was initially established, there weren't other locations within the town for storage of RVs like there are today. And so I think that might have been one of the primary driving forces to allow for this. But now there are several other options for storage of such recreational vehicles, and as to the cost piece, I don't see any financial implications to the town, at least, for release of this covenant. As you all know, I just want to remind everyone too that I believe the intention was that 2 years ago that the release of the previous covenant was anticipated that the entire area would be covenant free, and so I think that was the primary intent 2 years ago, and we're just essentially trying to address that here today.
Thank you, Mr. Edwards. Councillor Rintoul.
I'd like to move the recommendation if you're ready.
Please.
Move the recommendation that the town agree to the discharge of restrictive covenant number J055668 from the title of the property at 9429 Kenora Road.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All in favor? That carries unanimous. Thank you. We've previously dealt with item 13D. We have no items under correspondence. We're receiving 3 items of correspondence for information by virtue of being on the agenda. We have no notices of motion. We do have the motion to go on camera. Thank you in advance, Councillor Garnett.
Thank you, Mayor. I'll move that it is in the opinion of council that the public interest requires that persons other than members of the council and officers be excluded from the meeting to consider a confidential matter that under the Freedom of Information and Protection of Privacy Act may be excluded from disclosure respecting intergovernmental negotiations pursuant to section 90.1M of the Community Charter, and that council continue the meeting in closed session.
Second.
Moved and seconded, all in favor? That carries unanimous, thank you. We'll recess until 8:50 for a break, thank you.